Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
I'm John,
I'm Jacob,
and this is the Heimer.
and this is our first episode.
Very first one.
Yep.
Episode 1.
What do we got today?
We have what is happiness. So we're going to try to define happiness.
The big topic.
Oh yeah, lots of content. And so, I guess to start things off, what is happiness to you, Jacob?
Well, I don't pretend to totally know, how to always have happiness. I'm pretty happy overall in life. But I think like most people, it goes up and down and depends on phases of life and what you're doing. And so, I don't know, for me it's a whole bunch of things. It feels a little bit like a list almost in my mind of the things that make me happy. It's not just one or two things.
So there's like short-term happiness and long-term happiness.
Yeah.
And so what are some of the short-term happiness things on your list?
I'm guessing that I'm fairly common in the sense that it's like being with family and friends, good food, a decent amount of sleep, basic, like almost like basic care things a little bit lead to happiness in the short term for me.
Like Maslow's hierarchy of needs types things, so you fulfill each level of that.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take a lot for me. Like, I don't need to have like fancy things or big travel or anything. I think because I think my core is pretty happy. I tend to just be pretty positive and happy, and so if my basic needs are met, then it manifests as happiness for me. And what about you? Like, what does that mean? How do you seek happiness? And
Well, I think for the most part, I do pursue happiness. And it's like a feeling, right? So we all probably have different definitions too of what happiness is. So for example, somebody could feel happiness after they've maybe saved up all their money and they're able to finally purchase a car. That's like a happiness to them. They've pursued something, they've gotten that happiness. And somebody else, maybe who's more financially well off, that wouldn't bring them as much happiness just because of maybe it's the challenge of it. Mm-hmm. And so for me, trying to challenge myself to achieve certain goals always seems to bring me happiness when I actually find that goal and achieve it.
so is that something you regularly have then, as sort of goals, and you're always looking ahead and thinking about future things?
Which is, this future things is also a strange thing, because I think that's really what separates us from animals, other mammals, is that we have a very large frontal lobe, and this is what lets us plan for the future. And it's also what causes us anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of funny how planning for the future is going to cause us anxiety, and maybe I think that's probably the opposite of happiness.
Yeah, it's what a double-edged sword or whatever, or knife or whatever that saying is. Yeah, right. Yeah. So
I think back to your original question. For me, my happiness comes from pursuing goals, as well as what you were saying about just being around people, experiencing like what it means to be human, really. Mm-hmm.
Well, what about sort of the a little bit of the Buddhist philosophy of like, what about the now? Like, so planning and goal setting and stuff, I agree with you, is important to me too. But like, how will you, John, be happy today?
Being in the present, right?
Yeah, being in the present, right.
I think it's, in a way, it's not worrying about the future. It's being human. It's not having to plan out the future. It's seeing what's in front of you and I think finding the beauty what's in front of you. So really examining, not taking for granted certain things that are in your present, and acknowledging that they're there. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that a challenge for you to? Is it kind of like this balance thing between seeking happiness now and seeking some of those long-term goals and ambitions you might have?
I think it is.
Yeah.
Personally, because I think I focused a bit too much on the future. Actually, prepping for this made me realize that I think way too much about the future and planning the future, and that I do need to come back into the present and just experience some of the things around me.
Yeah. Well, me too. I think that's a bit of our human condition to do that. But
So what sorts of things do you do to live in the moment?
well, yeah. I mean, I struggle with it some. I'm such a planner in a lot of ways, and but I don't know. Yeah, I think I too often fall into this trap that so many people do of sort of living for the weekend kind of stuff, you know, and that's become particularly in focus in my life in the last year or two. I did way too much of that to the point where I'm thinking it's a Tuesday night and I'm not really doing very much, but like, what am I doing? What am I doing around the house on that Tuesday night for happiness? Like, it turns out for me, like, you know, one of the big limiting factors to be very practical in this conversation is the technology actually that I feel like is holding back some of my happiness, particularly my phone, the way my phone is, I'm tethered to my phone too much. And I keep making the same mistake where it's like these weekday nights or something and I'm just spending way too much time just looking at my phone or watching stuff and not engaged in the actual real world that would make me happier.
So why don't you think your phone brings you happiness?
Well, I feel like I feel a little bit enslaved to it. I feel like, you know, I'm sure you've experienced this when people text and call and stuff, there's this expectation to get back to them then, and then suddenly you're thinking, you know, what if they text or call again? Well, I better look, and then do I need to respond? And pretty soon your whole mind is just kind of stuck in, even like following news or anything pretty much online and stuff, it starts to become this thing that you're thinking about, even when you're not looking at your phone or device. And I just find that very limiting. I think there's a lot of creativity and intellectual space that's lost from that.
So when I mean, would you say you are planning, like it seems like when you're talking about looking at your phone, you need to go respond to this person, that you need to almost understand your future at that point in order to respond to the person?
Yeah, that's right. Oh, are you? So
I'm just trying to tie this back to the concept that we're always planning in our mind, and it's that frontal lobe that we use that's planning it, and it's causing. It's almost like the anti-happy, right? The planning for the future, being worried about the future, that's your anti-happy.
Yeah.
And being in the present when you're not planning, that's when you really are happy, because you're not using that part of your brain.
Yeah.
You're being present.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is getting a little bit off track, but maybe this is a whole nother podcast, but like, you know, some biologists might claim that we have very little free will, that we're actually just sort of the products of nature and that we're functioning in these ways. And so our planning and goal setting and everything is just like sort of this part of our survivalism. And I feel like living in the moment is a little bit, it's so like, you kind of have to be strange. Like, it's really healthy. I don't know what that means exactly, but like, you have to, like, I want to just say, like, people should just like dance around like crazy and run more and play more. You know, that's the benefit of being around children. Like, play and be silly and goof around and
Playing, okay, so let's talk about playing for a little bit.
Yeah.
And So how would playing bring us happiness, do you think?
Yeah, maybe it's some sort of like connection to our youth, or something. But it sure does for me to be a little bit playful and silly. And I feel like in our, I don't know if you've ever felt like this, John, but like generally as adults, maybe particularly in America, I'm not sure, but that like immaturity and silliness is frowned upon. It's sort of viewed as not being as smart or being young, but there's a certain level to some of that I feel like could get us closer to individual happiness. Like,
Well, I think you're. I think when you're playing, you're utilizing the environment around you, and so in a way that is you living in the moment. You're taking in the environment. You're using your brain to come up with creative ideas on what to do next, how to manipulate this environment to create something. And that's actually something else we could talk about, is just how control will bring us happiness. So when people are out of control, usually they are not as happy as when there's this sense of control, even though they may not be entirely in control of the situation, as long as they have some sort of grasp at it, that could bring them happiness.
yeah, interesting. Yeah, right. Well, I mean, I guess that's why the topic is so diverse. There's just so many ways and so many types of people, and to attempt happiness.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow there's some sort of common threads and themes that generally our culture is maybe not hitting on enough, because it feels like most people are generally not as happy as they could be.
Yeah.
This is a very personal question, you don't have to answer it in such a public forum, but where would you rate your happiness, like on a scale, say on a scale of 1 to 100? I don't mean today, but I mean overall in life. If you just had to throw out a number, this is very subjective, and I'm just putting you on the spot. Like 1 being the worst day of your life and 100 being the best.
Okay, yeah. I think it varies. I think from day to day. Long term, I think when I look at, like, if I imagine my graph of my happiness throughout my life, I think it peaked mainly when I was in college. I had a lot to look forward to after that. Mm-hmm. And right now, and I think that was the problem, is right now I had all these expectations of what could be in college. And now it's all happening, or has happened, and it's like, well, what's next? So I'm kind of dipping down, I'd say, kind of in my long-term happiness. I wouldn't say it's 1, definitely not. But maybe in college it was 100, and now it's like 70, 60. Mm-hmm. Kind of, I feel a trench, and I do think that I'm trying to maybe dig myself out of it.
Mm-hmm. Kind of going back to your opening ideas, you're talking about your long-term happiness, not your day-to-day.
Oh yeah, I think, well, that's day-to-day, long-term, those are interesting concepts, and they may be different things as well. It's mm-hmm. almost like your emotional state long-term versus like your short-term is more about what you're doing, what gratifications you're getting, and what sorts of chemicals your bodies are releasing. And so let's say I when I finish a book, I feel really good, and that releases like dopamine and serotonin. But maybe I read more and more books, and those levels keep going down further and further. So, mm-hmm. or maybe my body's just getting used to it. I don't know. Yeah, so that's like the short term of it all, right? It's doing these things and releasing these chemicals, but long term, you're trying to compare yourself to either somebody else or where you expect it to be. Uh-huh. And comparing yourself to somebody else is always dangerous, because it's like, who do you compare yourself to? You could compare yourself to like maybe a role model of yours. Mm-hmm. and maybe they seem very happy, so you don't see yourself as that happy, so you must not be as happy.
Yeah.
But maybe you compare yourself to somebody else, and they just seem like they're having a really hard life, and well, my life doesn't seem that bad, so maybe I am happy where I am. And
Yeah.
it's very subjective to who you are, happiness.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, in a way, it's like if you're, say, maybe a 70, and again, this is very subjective and it depends on, but if you're a 70, basically, how do you get up to more of like a 90? You know, knowing that we're basically not going to be at 100, that's not too realistic to expect that, you know, all the time. But how do you do, like, how do we, you know, if we're setting goals and we're thinking ahead and we're planning, which we talked about, how do we shape those goals and that planning around the idea of bumping that number up and having that long-term happiness sort of come into reality?
Yeah, I think it's really good to think about your goals, but once you think about them, you should stop thinking about them. You should focus on the task at hand and be in the present. And maybe every now and then refer to your goal in the future. Or maybe let's say you have like like a 1 month goal, a 6 month goal, 2 year goal, right? And don't keep referring to all those goals. Come up with your plan and then stop thinking about your plan and just focus on that one thing and be in the moment, be present in that moment.
Yeah.
Because constantly thinking about the future, you're just going to get so much anxiety of how am I going to get there? And anxiety then turns into depression.
Yeah. Well, roughly how old are your parents? Are they boomers? Or not quite?
We'll say 60, 65 in that range.
Oh, okay. Because mine are a tad older, and I'm a bit older than you, so my parents are like in their mid-70s, basically.
Yeah.
But, you know, that generation, they did a lot of great things, still do a lot of great things, but and every generation before was sort of very much about like you finish college, high school or college, you get married, you have kids, you get the house, the car, you work in
the American life. You have your white picket fence, right?
Yeah, yeah. And that, you know, like we kind of poke fun at some of that, but like that's still a big part of our culture. It's a part of our mentality, I feel like. And so from our parents' generations, you know, that's sort of the expectation. So I think a lot of us that their children then, I think it's ingrained in us a little bit, like that you need to follow some of these paths.
I totally agree with that, and I feel that, and I think that's the expectations that I was setting for myself in college. Is like my parents did this,
Yeah.
I want to do this, and now I'm at a point where I'm like, well, why am I doing this?
yeah, right. We're told to like start saving for retirement when we're 25 or whatever. Like what? At some point.
Yeah, save for retirement, get a stable job, get a house, take out a mortgage on a house, get married, have kids.
Yeah. And then you look around and all these people under cul-de-sacs and everything. I mean, I'm not judging them all. I've been in this boat some too. Are just not happy. You know, they're just not happy enough. It's like they're following somebody else's dream or something.
Yeah.
And I don't know. So like, we all need to collectively be thinking about how to break those chains.
That comes to who you are as an individual. Like, how do you? Perhaps this is another topic, but how do you define yourself as an individual? And does that actually create more happiness than trying to follow somebody else's path? And if you do follow somebody else's path and you're achieving those goals, does that still give you happiness?
Right.
Do you still feel long-term happiness?
Right. I don't know. I remember as a kid, you know, I think most of us are like this, meeting strange people. Like I remember one of my dad's cousin who lived in downtown Indianapolis for many years, and I'll keep this story short, but he called it urban camping. So he had his own house, but he didn't pay any utilities, even in the winter, and he wouldn't pay any money. He didn't pay any taxes. He wouldn't do it. He was one of those kind of guys, kind of like what we used to call a hermit or something. And as a kid, when I would visit him, I just thought he was the strangest person. Like, you know, and he was, but like, what was his happiness? You know, he's passed away since, but like, what would he say? They did that huge happiness study years ago, and they found that some of the happiest people that they studied were the homeless children in the Mexico City landfill community. And
So many opportunities to be creative there.
I don't know why. I mean, I haven't read the whole report, but like, what? Like, what? Like, how can that be? Like, what are we all missing here?
Well, is happiness bliss? Is it the unaware of where you are? Is it, I mean, that in a way is living in the moment. That's very much present. You're blissfully unaware of external things to you. You're living in a landfill. You have so many objects around you that you can create things and play things. And there's the play again.
Yeah. And maybe not tied to a 9 to 5, you know. In that case, it was children, but still, I mean, not having...
Yeah, freedom is...
Freedom, right.
Freedom to do whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, you and I are living in this land of the free, we call it, but we're free. We are free. We have a lot of freedoms that I'm very thankful for, but in some ways we're also very economically bound.
Yes, and is that our own fault?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like your uncle, was it?
My dad's cousin.
Dad's cousin, yeah. Was he economically bound?
Not
the
much.
way he was living, yeah.
Probably some. I mean, probably in some indirect ways. He probably got some health care somehow, and you know, we're all connected to society somehow, but not much. Yeah.
Right. So he probably felt freedom, which freedom could be happiness.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe that's. I know we're going to be talking about happiness more in other podcasts and everything. So maybe that's kind of where we could take things a little bit and see, kind of get more concrete about how to seek that happiness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not that we have all the answers, but, or maybe none of the answers.
Is there ever an answer though? Since happiness is so subjective, maybe more just guidelines.
Yeah.
How to blaze your own trail of happiness.
Yeah, but I bet there are some sort of tracers in there that would help huge amounts of people seek that. But,
so I think maybe exploring freedom, control over your environment, creativity, just being creative.
Yeah.
I think living in the present, I think that's a strong one.
Yes.
To being happy and less anxious about life.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, well, let's stop there for now.
Sure, yeah.
And we'll continue the discussions. We've got a lot of podcasts to come and a lot of things to talk about.
Oh, yes.
So
lots on happiness to come.
Yep.
That's our next podcast.
Right.
More on happiness.
Yep, part 2. Yeah.
Diving deeper into it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Yeah. I would like to thank our executive producer, Schmidt, for all his work.
Oliver Bailey on tech.
Uh-huh.
So thank you, everybody, for your support, and we look forward to sharing this journey with you.
Yeah.